On today's Rice Report, I am joined by Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson. She is a former IRS agent, and I invited her on to learn more about her battle against the IRS, and to find out what she's up to today. There is a second part to this conversation that is uncensored and only available on Patreon and for private members. Before we get into it, take time to visit my website at ricetvx.com. There you can sign up for my mailing list so you can stay up to date on all things Rice. Once you've signed up for my mailing list, you will find links for my channels and socials towards the top of the website. Make sure you are subscribed to both of my YouTube channels, Rice Against the Grain and Rice TVX. If you want to support my work directly, as well as get early access, exclusive content for both channels, plus more, join my Patreon. I also wanted to share that I have recently partnered up with ITM Trading. So if you want to schedule a gold and silver strategy call to build your wealth shield and support Rice TVX, be sure to use my specific landing page that you see on the screen, and I will also include custom Calendly links and an 800 number that you can utilize to schedule your strategy call with the ITM trading professionals. And again, it is a way to support Rice TVX. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. All right, joining me on today's show is Sherry Peel Jackson, or I should say Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson. She is a former IRS agent, a retired CPA, certified fraud examiner. She's a licensed minister, financial expert, business strategist. She's an author and an international speaker. I believe you spoke at Anarchapulco, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. That was 2000. That was really my last trip before the pandemic hit.
2020, you mean?
2020. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
or 29. Yeah, because that would have been February of 2020. Yeah.
February 2020, exactly.
Okay, and then recently, I know you did the Red Pill Expo, which is Mr. G. Edward Griffin's conference, which he's been on the show a few times. He'll be back here in a couple weeks. So,
okay, great.
Thank you again for taking time to do this conversation. I really appreciate that. In your words, because you've got quite a resume here going on. Who is Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson?
I am just a regular old person who was taught to ask for the truth. And if you don't know the truth, your reality is a fallacy. So when it comes down to getting to the truth, you end up in rabbit holes. And I have a big mouth. So I'm one of the people who, when I find out something that's going to help the people, I'm going to tell the people and count the cost later, obviously.
I respect that. I do. And obviously you're definitely outspoken, because one of the first things that I was introduced to you originally was the America Freedom to Fascism documentary that Aaron Russo put up in 2006, where he was going on a quest to find out whether there was a law requiring Americans to pay an income tax. And you, as a former IRS agent, ultimately ended up getting charged, found guilty, and did some jail time. And I want to get into that because I want to find out what happened. Because when I was watching the documentary, one thing that you said is, I have one question. And that question was, where is the law? Show me the law. Right. So a statement following the question, but where is the law? And what I wanted to ask you, because I don't have a full understanding of this whole story, but when and why did you stop working at the IRS?
Okay, I started in 1988. I left in 1995. I had moved up in the ranks, and the job had begun to be something that overtook my family. I'm a Christian person, one of those hardline Christians, and I saw that coming, and I decided that I was going to leave and come home and take care of my family. So it had nothing to do with me finding out about the fraud. It actually was me leaving. I actually quit. And since I was already a CPA, I just opened up a CPA firm in the basement so that I could be, at home more. Now, people knew stuff, but they were afraid to tell me when I was an IRS agent. So from 95, when I left, up until 2000, I had different people from all walks of life, even up to state senators coming to say, hey, I heard that the income tax was being misappropriated and misapplied to the American people. And I really put that in the back of my head, knowing that some people believe that, but I didn't do any research until 2000. I specialize in churches. And one of the pastors came to me and said, hey, I have a parishioner that is really, feeding me all this information about the income tax. Will you talk to this person? So I did. And this woman water hosed me down with information. But 2 weeks later, she said, hey, all the information that I told you a couple of weeks ago is in the USA Today. So I went to pick up the USA Today and We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education and put a full page ad in there. And it said, Dear We the People, the income tax is a fraud, basically. And talked about how we're being, robbed. And within the body of that particular paper were two things that caught my eye. Number one was a $50,000 reward offered by a man named Bill Conklin or William Conklin to prove that we have to file and pay. The second thing was that there was another agent out there, Joe Bannister, and he had resigned from the IRS after giving him a report on 2 years of research that he did that showed that the income tax was being misappropriated and misapplied. So I ordered a couple of Joe's books and I went after that $50,000 reward. And long story short, a couple of months later, I'm like, oh, this thing is a fraud. The information that I have shows that there's no law and that they, twist words this way and that way. And being the big mouth that I am, I started talking about it. And that's when I got together with Joe Bannister and John Turner and some others, and we started speaking around the country. That's when we got the attention of what I call the insidious representatives of Satan, better known as the IRS.
Was that the tax honesty movement, or is that something separate?
That is the tax honesty movement.
Okay. And we just covered very heavily in that documentary as well.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Joe Bannister, because I was going to ask you your thoughts about him. Was this book out at that time?
Yes. That's the book that I ordered 2 copies of. And it basically, he took his own time on weekends and holidays and talked and interviewed with people and did his own research. And he basically humbly gave the IRS a report saying, hey, I'm kind of seeing here that, the income tax is being misapplied to us. And instead of giving him an answer, they said he needed to take a week or 2 off and then decide whether he was going to resign. So he took that 2 weeks and he ended up resigning.
And both him and you had to deal with, I don't know if it's just like lawsuits, criminal charges. I'm not sure how it's put, but both of you had to deal with that. And your situation wasn't successful. His was. He didn't go to jail. You did. And where do you think, what went wrong with that? I'm just curious.
Oh, it's easy. And a lot of people try to make it a racial issue. Oh, you went to jail because you were Black. Had nothing to do with that. Joe had great lawyers. They had a great strategy, and he had thinking jurors. And that's the first thing. And his trial was before mine. So after Joe won, then there was another person that won. His name is Tommy Cryer. He was a lawyer out of Shreveport, Louisiana. They basically got on the stand and showed all the Supreme Court cases and state Supreme Court cases that showed that income, the definition of income is corporate profits, and we don't have corporate profits. So let me give you a quick example. When I come to your house and we make a deal that I cut your grass for $100, you're giving me $100 in exchange for my arms, legs, and brain and time, right? That's
Right.
an exchange. That's not something that should be taxable. When a Walmart, let's say the smallest Walmart, makes $100,000 in one day, they get to write off the salaries of the people, the utilities, and all these other expenses. And let's say $60,000 in expenses. They're only paying tax on $40,000. They're not paying tax on the $100,000 that they made, but we're paying tax on the $100, the whole $100 that I use my time, energy, my life force for. And that's basically it from a moral standpoint. But that explains why in the beginning, the founding fathers and those that made up this stuff didn't want our labor to be taxed, because that's something we never get back. So, from that standpoint, Tommy Cryer showed that that's the way it was. Income is corporate profit, and he was acquitted. So, Chris, by the time they got to me, they couldn't lose another case. So they sent people down to Atlanta from Washington, D.C. to prosecute me. They didn't let me say the things I needed to say about the law. The judge kept cutting me off and saying, I will instruct the jury on the law. She wouldn't let me explain the things I needed to explain. And they wouldn't let me ask the jurors this one question. Would you be afraid to acquit Miss Jackson for fear that the IRS was going to come after you? And I honestly believe that every hand in the jury pool would have gone up.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, so Joe Bannister's case and Tommy Crier's case were both prior to yours,
Yes.
and it didn't help with like there was no precedent set with the two of them for your case.
Yes, the precedent was for the IRS to make sure that they didn't let happen, in my case, what happened in those. Think of football. If there's a football team that's winning all the time and then they start losing, the first thing they're going to do is go back to the drawing board on Monday morning and figure out what they did wrong. And that's what they did for me. It's like everything that happened in Joe Bannister's and Tommy Crier's case, they made sure it didn't happen in my case. I was ready with those same Supreme Court and state Supreme Court cases that Tommy Crier said, but she kept shutting me down and telling me that I couldn't say that was, that was her job to tell the jury about the law. So yes, they learned from their mistakes, and they continued to make sure that the jurors were fearful, because one of the things that kept coming up on the prosecution is that I was a six-figure earner. Now I took negotiation training and a whole lot of IRS training, and what they do is they make sure that the person that they're prosecuting has jury appeal. If you're making $30,000, they're not going to prosecute you because the jury is going to feel sorry for you. They don't prosecute police officers and nurses and firefighters and helpers like that, because people are going to have a heart for those people. But people aren't going to have a heart for six-figure earners who aren't paying their fair share, quote unquote.
Correct, 100%. And do you actually look at labor as being private property, as some people do?
That's for sure. That's for sure. We have unalienable rights, not inalienable. Somebody made up that crazy name, to throw people off. A lien is something that you put on if you don't pay your house or whatever. We have unalienable rights given by God for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's mine. I have the right to go out and do what I need to do to feed myself and my family. And you're trying to take a part of what I earn from my life resource away from me.
Which is, when you think about it, especially how much they want to take, it should anger most people. It really should. And most people, I think, are pretty angry about the IRS. They just don't really think there's anything that we can do about it because it's been in existence for over 110 years now ish. So you did, the documentary came out in 2006 and you were ultimately found guilty October of 2007. So when were you charged?
It was March 2007, same year. They came up with the information. If you're
right
charged,
after, but that was right after, a little bit after the documentary
right after
came
the
out.
movie. I mean,
So there was an attack on you, basically.
Well, basically, it was all of us, because prior to that, there was a congressional hearing about us. They had our pictures blown up real big on easels, and they were talking about how they have to shut all these, former agents and all these people down from talking about the income tax, but they wouldn't let us speak. And one of the reporters said, well, hey, these people that you're talking about, why can't you let them speak during this? And they said, they have a different narrative than we want to put out. So they had congressional hearings, and I heard that one of the Congress people's aide said, hey, well, what about their free speech? And then it got real silent. And then after that, they just started prosecuting us. Joe and I aren't the only ones. We're the only ones that probably got notoriety, but there were other people within the tax honesty movement that were prosecuted. Some of them won, some of them lost, but they were adamant about making sure that the people in America continue to be afraid of them concerning the theft of their resources.
Yeah, no, that's a kind of an understatement, but yeah. So Joe Bannister and Tommy and yourself, you guys were all charged kind of around the same time period after the documentary.
Yes.
And
Tommy Crier's trial was 6 months before mine, so it was just 6 months that he'd have won.
How coincidental, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Yeah, because I mean, one of the arguments that I've been hearing and seeing is that the average American citizen should not have to pay tax, like an income tax. And going back, some of the notes that I've taken from various different resources was the U.S. Constitution strictly forbids a direct unapportioned tax on wages and salaries of American citizens. And it also talks about the U.S. Supreme Court has consistently ruled that the income tax is a tax on profits and gains, like you said, not labor and wages. And the 16th Amendment didn't grant any new additional taxation powers.
And that was all in my research that the judge wouldn't let me talk
Wouldn't
about.
let you say any of it.
None of it.
Have you gotten an answer to that question of show me the law? Where is the
No,
law?
no, because if American people knew the truth, they would keep their hard-earned resources and take the power away from those who are using our resources for no good. The resources that are taken from the American people are to keep people in power and just change the trajectory of this country. And that's, for sure, that's what's going on with all of this money. Why is it that these things are happening? Why is it that we have millions of people in the United States starving, but we're sending money overseas like it's, like a rainstorm?
Right. Oh yeah. No, I'm surprised that most Americans haven't just gotten in an uproar about that. Seeing how much the nation is kind of having a problem with homelessness everywhere around the nation in staggering amounts, and then we're taking care of another nation,
Right.
which it doesn't make
Several other
sense.
nations. But you know what? It's just the powers that be hired spin doctors way back even in the 30s and 40s to, you know, have people in fear. That whole thing about there's nothing sure in life but death and taxes. Even 8-year-olds have heard that. So they have that etched in their mind that they have to pay taxes and they're scared to go to jail and all these other things. They have made Americans afraid. Now this country was built on taxation without representation, and we're right back where we were before. But the government school system has changed the mindset and the minds and the way people think, or lack of. It's more groupthink now. So the way to bring a people to its knees is to make sure that you dumb down the education system and you continue to make them busy and take their resources. And that's basically what's been happening over the last 100 years or so. And that's the plan. There is a plan. This is not some conspiracy theory. What's the difference between a conspiracy and a strategy? This is a strategy, straight
Yeah.
up.
Well, okay. What is their end result in your opinion with the strategy?
I think it's going to be a one world government. They're trying to bring the United States down to the level that they can control it, like Klaus Schwab and his crew
The World
talking
Economic
about
Forum.
we'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And they've already taken over in Australia, New Zealand, and some Indian nations over there. That those people rebelled and took over the capital. It's like we see these things if you pay attention. If you turn off the electronic income reducer called the TV, you'll be able to see what's really going on all over the world. And if you look at that and look at the results of Klaus Schwab and Yuval Harari, the one who calls us useless eaters, if you look at these things and pay
Hackable
attention,
animals.
exactly. So
Yeah.
so I'm not an animal. I'm not your slave. I'm not any of that. And so I'm going to fight for my freedom, one way or another.
I'm really glad that you're still paying attention, considering how long you've kind of been in this freedom fighter mode that you've been in.
I have children and grandchildren, Chris.
I mean, going to
What
prison.
Thomas Paine said, that if there be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace.
Well said. Well said. Your charges, were they federal charges? Or is it
Yeah.
state level?
No, state level. Federal misdemeanor, willful failure to file. It's a misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor,
Yeah,
the
because
definition is 1 year, but they kept me in there 4 years. I mean, they gave me a 4-year sentence and kept me in there 3 years.
so you served 3, then you had to
Yeah,
do what,
because they had
parole?
to give me halfway house and good time. They don't call it parole anymore, but yeah, they had to give me good time, 6 months good time and 6 months halfway house.
Okay, because I mean, I was watching something that was talking about kind of what you said with it being a misdemeanor, that from a federal perspective, it's not a felony. So a lot of the times they're going after people on a state level. Why is that? Are they able to make it a felony or just get more time out of people on a state level versus federal?
For some charges, not necessarily the tax charges, but for other criminal type charges, yes.
Okay. Okay, I was curious about that. Um, how is it that you think, in your opinion, though, with having people having success in court against the IRS, that they're able to continue on this whole ordeal with taxing the average American citizen on their income, their wages and salary. Why is this continuing to happen? Why haven't we been able? Is it not enough people? What is it, in your opinion, that's preventing the American people from waking up and preventing this from happening? Because it's supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people.
Well, there's a lot behind that. A lot of people, fear is the biggest thing right there. And then the corporatocracy, which is the corporations, the government, and the banksters work together. So if you have a job, you know, you've got a company that's invested or vested with the government and the banksters. And if you go in, like some of the people that I've talked to and my clients, and say, well, I don't want you to take out any tax. I want my whole paycheck, and here's why. And they give them a whole, treatise full of information, then they get fired. I've had that happen to a couple of my clients where the job, the company, corporation doesn't even want to deal with that person. They don't even want that person because they know that person is going to start probably talking to the other workers about it. I had one woman hire me to come in and talk to her boss. She was his top salesperson and she was receiving a 1099. She wasn't an employee. And she wasn't having any tax taken out. And the IRS was after her to the point where they got in touch with her boss and say, hey, you need to start taking money from her because she hasn't been paying taxes. So I sat in front of this man, which was about maybe twice my age at the time. And he listened. He was very patient and very humble. And he said, Sherry, I've been knowing about this for years. I'm, twice your age. But one thing is true. I don't want to have to wrestle with the IRS. I don't care what the law says. I care what the government will do to me. And that's where most people are, Chris. They, on the individual level, they are just at the point where they want to stay in their comfort zones.
Yeah.
They want to stay in their situation. They do.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately true. A lot of people are. If you look at what happened in 2020, and I'm trying to be careful with what I'm saying because of the YouTube censorship, but there were more people that were willing to trust what was being told to them by authority figures, whether it's government or whatever, than people saying no.
It's more comfortable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, no, and change is definitely uncomfortable, and people. But it's like I try to manifest this thing. I try to say it as much as possible to bring it into reality that when enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people,
And
and we
that
can
is true. That
we
is
can
true.
peacefully change this. We can stop consenting.
That's true, but we don't have that critical mass, and
Right.
people want to stay in their comfort zone. And one of my sayings, my major sayings is, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And so most people aren't really living; they're surviving. Because I just got off the phone with somebody that's making almost $100,000 a year, paying almost $3,000 in rent, and it's just frustrating for you to be over in a situation where you can't thrive. And you turn around and you see the Faucis and you see Trudeau up in Canada and all these people flying around and jet setting, and we're struggling to make ends meet or just barely making a vacation to Florida. There's no way you can leave the country. So people are frustrated. People are tired of it. They don't know what to do. And I hate that they're taking it out on each other. We've got to change that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny with the conditioning and the education system. We were taught, at least I was, and I'm pretty sure you were. You did the Pledge of Allegiance. America, united we stand, divided we fall. They said it right there. If we could get past all the division and come together for the common purpose, we can do what's necessary and what's right, and we can do it very, very peacefully. It doesn't have to be. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't think it's going to be like that. And just kind of looking at the bigger picture of what could be down the road, it doesn't look great. And I'm just trying to be a realist as far as like what we're looking at economically, what's happening with these non-governmental organizations like the World Economic Forum and their influence, what the central banks are doing, what's happening with the devaluation of money, currency, I should say, not money, but the fiat currency, the inflation that we've been dealing with here in the United States. People hanging on the words of the Federal Reserve to fix the problem that they created. It's just like, when will it be enough to get people to wake up without dividing the nation to a point that it ends up becoming something it shouldn't?
Exactly. I mean, we're at a point where people really need to start paying attention. For the last couple of days when I've been on interviews or talking to people, I challenge people to turn off the television, the electronic income reducer, and the electronic intellect reducer for 2 months. Read, pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to what's going on in other countries, and make a decision that you're going to do something to help your family thrive. Because when stuff happens, when the excrement finally does hit the portable cooling device, it's going to be too late. I know wealthy people are playing it. Doggone it, Oprah has her island. Ted Turner has 1,000 or plus acres up in Montana. Bill Gates is buying up all of the farmland. Why are you still looking at TV? Why are you, engrossed in the football game until Tom Brady starts stroking me a check? My team is the Jackson team.
It's just like, I mean, that's why a lot of people compare the United States to Rome, because Rome had the gladiator, the Colosseum events that distracted people from all the terrible things that they had to deal with in their day to day. And it's happening today with just different things, but it's the same concept. People are just being distracted while destruction happens around them. And it all happens technically because of them. I mean, all of this stuff happens because of the consent of the governed, whether it's manufacturer consent, whether you realize it or not, it's still consent of the governed, unfortunately.
You're
What was I going to ask you in regards to, and this might be too personal of a question. I don't know if you'd want to decline the answer. I totally get it. You were found guilty in 2007 of 4 counts of failure to file your income taxes. Have you filed income taxes since then?
Yes. Let me explain. Back then, I attempted to cut the head off of the beast, not realizing that the people were too fearful. Even if there was one juror in there that would say not guilty, I would have been okay. And I thought I could get that. Not realizing a whole bunch of stuff. So, not realizing that even if I had been found not guilty, they could have, or if it had been a mistrial, they could have retried me, because they have all the resources coming in from we the people. So I'm older and wiser now, and what I do is what wealthy people do. The wealthy people do file, but they don't pay any taxes because they understand that the tax code is written for businesses. We are now starving the beast instead of trying to go right up in front of him and cut his head off. When in 2000, I think it was 16, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were running for president, and Hillary Clinton said Donald Trump didn't pay his taxes, and everybody's like, and sucked all of the air out of the room. Then they started calling me, "Did you hear? See there? Did you hear? Donald Trump didn't pay his taxes." And I said, "Well, I heard that he said he was a smart man, because I don't have TVs. I just had to hear from other people or look online. He said he was a smart man, and he is, because he knows how to use the tax code. So as opposed to stomping my feet and putting a target on my back or any other's back, because I don't want anybody to have to experience what I did in the prison situation, instead of doing that, saying I'm not paying because this is mine, which is the truth, why don't we just learn how to starve the beast? And how to starve the beast is to get your own home-based business, and then you can write off everything but the kitchen sink, like corporations and businesses do.
Write off everything. Well, since you mentioned that, have you looked into things like trusts?
Yes, I have a trust. I have international companies, and I've learned from the wealthy. One of the things that happened during this trial and after is wealthy people started coming to me and sharing things with me, because they felt like I had the guts to stand up. And so I share that information with my clients concerning how we can thrive instead of just surviving day to day. So I do.
Okay, I like that. Are you familiar with and I'm not sure if this is the right term, but private common law irrevocable trusts?
I'm familiar with both the common law irrevocable trust and the standard irrevocable trust. Yes.
Okay. Is the one that I mentioned is something that's like when you hear, and I'm not sure if it was a Rockefeller who said it or whom, not sure, but it was own nothing, control everything.
Exactly. That's what you have to do, because otherwise you won't keep anything. You won't keep much. I know of families where they built something up, and then one of the family members or their children ended up in a divorce, and half of it went to someone who didn't have anything to do with it. And the Rockefellers and all those who have these foundations and these structures put together, there's more than just trust. So I want to call them structures. The ones that have these structures put together, they make sure that everything stays in the family. You have use of it, but you can't own it, because if you own it, then it can be taken away from you individually. So I don't want that for myself or my family. So I explain to everybody, make sure you have, if you have assets, even if they're not paid for it, there are rules that came into play where you can put your home in a trust, and you're still paying the mortgage on it. So take advantage of these things.
Right. And it takes away where, like, in a sense, if the IRS comes after you, they can't seize assets that are owned by a trust because
Correct.
they're not directly owned by you.
Correct.
So you're just trying to, like, basically use the system against itself.
Exactly. You learn the system and then you beat them at it. You learn the game. Learn the game and beat them at it, as opposed to coming up and standing up there with a sword and saying, I want to cut your head off. Just, stand back and starve the beast. Just stop giving it food.
What about the argument that people use? I mean, I'm not sure if you said this, that I'm not an individual going on legal definitions, or what was the other thing that people were saying in regards to definitions came into a lot of play, like what a U.S. citizen is, and does any of that play any relevance with any of this?
They ignore all of that. You can say all of that, but then there are certain things that you do after you've said that put you back into their jurisdiction. For example, in my trial, there were exhibits, and the government's exhibits 1, 2, and 3 were my state driver's license, my social security card, and my bank signature card. And I know some of your listeners will probably understand that those were the government's first three pieces of evidence against me, which it doesn't matter what I said or what I filed or whatever. And also, people that have jobs need to understand that W-2, that 1099, that K-1, those forms are filled out by your company, the corporation, and sent in to the government as sworn affidavits that you received taxable income. So the IRS has transcripts showing how much money you made on that job, and that is a sworn affidavit that is taxable. So they have their tentacles pretty deep in us. The older you are, the deeper and the more tentacles they have in you. And you have to figure out either how to get out of it. Some people can. Or if you can't get out of it because you got a pension, a lot of people that I talk to that believe me, but they're afraid to jeopardize that pension because they don't have any money coming in other than the pension. So people need to figure out for themselves how they want to deal with the beast.
Yeah, and you mentioned jurisdiction, and I'm sure some of this has come across your plate at some point. I don't like to use these terms, but these are the terms that most people are familiar with. Would be like the sovereign citizen movement, free man on the land. I've been researching and looking into the legal fiction. I've heard people try to use the argument of U.S. citizenship puts you under jurisdiction, renounce your U.S. citizenship, become a state citizen, any of that. Have you found any relevancy in any of that stuff? Out of curiosity?
I haven't done much research on it, and even if it's true, Chris, this is my main point. A lot of people do a lot of research. They spend hours and hours doing research. Even if these things are true, the government as a whole is not going to let millions of people off their tax rolls because of this or that. So as people learn these things, and especially if they start to go out and solicit money for these things, let me change you over to a state national or American national, let me do this, I'll help you do this, I'll give you the paperwork, then they just clamp down on them after a while, regardless of whether it's true or not. I've had people that said they were Native Americans or this kind of tribe get dragged out of their house.
Moorish Americans as well.
After all of that paperwork filed, they don't care about that paperwork. They make sure that they maintain power. And who's going to tell them? Who's going to enforce whether their position is wrong and yours is right? Let's say all this is right. Let's say we are human resources, and our slave surveillance numbers are literally collateral and all these. Let's say all that's right. Who's going to enforce that on our behalf?
Good question. Good question. And what I've, that's after looking into it for a few years and not really trying anything, but just researching and not really seeing any real evidence, any empirical proof that yes, this is the way out of the matrix, if you want to say it that way. Um, and then I started to also come to this conclusion of if we did find the way out of the matrix, what's gonna like why would the American government, US government, any fashion allow for us to get out? Because but a lot of times people want to talk about if you do things within the actual law using the code that they have to honor those agreements. But obviously there's been so many things showing about what's happened with the IRS, and IRS is still around doing what they're doing.
Right. Right. And you're right. I mean, it's common sense will tell you that they're not going to give all this up. I'm going to give you an example. It's not necessarily with the taxes, but with the mortgages. And I don't know how much studying you've done on credit and stuff, but you're not supposed to be able to loan credit. It's illegal to loan credit. If you want to buy a car and I have $20,000 to give you, I worked for that $20,000. I worked hard for that $20,000 and I saved it up and I'm loaning it to you. I'm loaning it to you in hopes that you'll pay me back after you get your car. Well, banks don't have to do that. They can just create money out of thin air, and it's illegal. So there was a fella in I think it was it was the early 90s. His name was Dr. Livingstone, and he had, gotten a hold to the Federal Reserve's money mechanics, which I hope you all already have that book, and some other materials. And
What's the
basically,
book?
Money Mechanics by the
Okay.
Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve Money Mechanics. It basically tells you what they're doing to us with the fractional reserve banking and stuff. That's too deep to get into right now.
Well,
But
I'm familiar with the G. Edward Griffin Creature from Jekyll Island book.
yes, definitely. That was one of the hardest, angering books that I read. But the Money Mechanics is a book that the Federal Reserve itself put out telling us what they are doing to us. So Dr. Livingstone put together court cases and, said, well, this mortgage that these people have on this house that you've given them, or whatever bank it is not real and it should be discharged. So he got about 7 of these cases where these people's mortgages were discharged because it was found that the bank did not give anything but credit. So he decided that he was going to, tell the world, hey, I've gotten 7 mortgages discharged and, I have a system. And he started taking money for it. And, people were throwing their wallets at him to get rid of a mortgage. So by the time I got involved with it, there were a lot of people and they were angry because after the 7 or 8 cases that were won, the banksters, lawyers for all these banks got together and they got together with the judicial system and all that. And they had the judges start summarily dismissing these cases. So it under no merit at all, these cases started getting dismissed. And he never thought that would happen. He was like, we're winning cases here and this is the truth. Yeah, it's the truth. But you can't have millions of people just getting rid of their mortgages. The banks will go out of business. Well, they got the drug trade, but that's another story.
Right.
And so they started dismissing these cases and the people were angry because they had paid him. And obviously he had spent the money. So he ended up dying. He ended up, I think he had a heart attack and died because he just, he thought he was going to continue to win and the government just decided no. So this is going to continue to happen. If there's something that really is the truth, they're not going to let it happen. We, the people, have to make some decisions.
What was the time frame of that?
I want to say 2000. No. 1990, late 90s to early 2000. So I want to say like 99 all the way maybe to 2003 or 4 around that area.
It's like mid to late 60s. I heard a case like that, and then I
Mhm.
thought that somehow that they had corrected it to where people couldn't do that. Because yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of banking, fractional reserve banking. This whole make believe, it's a bunch of adults playing make believe with monopoly money. It's the craziest thing, and it's like people don't realize like the power that we're giving to the Federal Reserve. That was another thing too that was brought up in that documentary, America, Freedom to Fascism, that people can, and I really encourage people to check out that documentary. It's a good way to really wake people up with factual information and then show you how beyond broken our government is and corrupt it is. It's a travesty.
It is. And some of the stuff at the end of the documentary which people originally said, "Oh, this doesn't have anything to do with the income tax. Why is he talking about this stuff?" And it's coming into play, like the social credit score. He talked about, them using your credit or some kind of a digital system, that digital chip, to find out, whether or not you've flown too much this year or whether you've had too much pizza and all that. And they have that going on over in other countries, specifically like China. I saw a video not too long ago where a guy had to put his phone up to show his credit score so he could get some toilet paper in a public bathroom. This is coming, and people just aren't paying attention.
What I'd like to do, if you're cool with it, is I'm going to get you in a moment to share what you're currently doing, share your current websites, and update everybody as to what you're up to. And then maybe we can do a second part right afterwards where I can upload it specifically on other platforms other than YouTube, and we can speak freely, because I did have notes since you do talk about being a financial expert. I do have some notes that if we had time to kind of get into this area of central bank digital currencies and digital ID. So yeah, let's go ahead and move over to now. What is Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson up to? You got your two websites, which the main website, I can just pull it up, is sherrypeeljackson.com. And there's an about section on there that really gives your story. You can also order books. You have the Church Wealth Ministry Health book. You also have How to Stick It to the IRS, Confessions from a Former Insider, and How to Escape the Rat Race, 4 Keys to Acquire the Life of Your Dreams. And then the other website that I noticed was Wake the People. This was in your email. So you mind sharing what you're doing between both websites? Because it looks like you're doing something a little different, but kind of paralleling each other.
Right. So the wakethepeople.com website is for the general public, the person who just says, I'm working hard and I want to keep more of what I earn. So, I offer people consultation. If they're in IRS trouble, I figure out if they're able to take advantage of some of the things that I've learned to help them not have to pay. So, not too long ago, actually in November, a woman called me. She was in tears. She said she just got back from the doctor and she had a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And when she got home, she got the mail and she had an IRS audit letter. And I was determined to help her. She didn't keep good records, but I got her and her husband together. And between the three of us, me talking and then working, she ended up getting a refund. So that's what I love to do. So that's the Wake the People site. The sherrypeeljackson.com site is more for the churches and ministries. As I said before, I work closely with churches. In my last 2.5 years at the IRS, I audited ministers. And so I know what the IRS is doing to churches and ministries and wanted to stop that. So those are the two websites. I'm also in the process of creating digital courses. So my first course is going to be like a 12-week course. It's going to be about, keeping what you earn, protecting it, and making it grow. So it's going to be for the basic person who says, I want a business. I want to learn how to keep more of my money. And hopefully that will be out by midsummer. And then I have some other digital courses on how to write a book, because I've written 8 books. Some of them are on Amazon.
I didn't know that. You don't have all of them on your website?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't. So they're older books, and these are, more popular books. So some of the other ones are on there, and they're on Kindle. Some of them even aren't on. Some of them have been taken off of Amazon. But those are the 3 current books that I have. Then I have a book. I'm gonna do a course on how to start a business in 30 days. I'm gonna do one on how to write a book. Just different courses, and I'm going to create a whole platform for all of the classes that I do, because I want people to be able to get the knowledge without having to always go one-on-one. Now, those who want to do one-on-one, I have lots of one-on-one clients from a small scale, for 3 months all the way up to 2 years. It depends on how much hand holding they want. Also, as a part of the solution for my family, we are building a master plan community in Costa Rica. I want to be like the wealthy and not put all my eggs in one basket and not plant all my flags in one place. So I have been, working on this for a while. COVID really slowed us down, but we want a community of like-minded people. When the grocery stores close down here, it's gonna be, everything's gonna break loose. It's gonna be bad. But in Costa Rica, yeah, don't worry about it. They have food falling literally off the trees.
Yeah.
You're not gonna starve to death. You're not gonna freeze to death either. Like the people that are, having these issues over in Europe with the Ukraine and all that, and the pipeline being blown up. You're not gonna freeze to death, and you're gonna be maybe 10 minutes away from the ocean where you can get fish, and there's also freshwater rivers. So grocery stores closed down over there, no big deal. And that's part of my plan B. Other people need to be making their plan B.
Plan B is Costa Rica. That's a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more of just like a regular community? Like you guys are just kind of like, is it a business? Is it just, it's a place to live? Is it a resort kind of thing?
It's just a community, not a resort, just where
Okay.
people want to retire or want to, build a home and put an Airbnb there and make money while they're not there. We're still in the beginning stages. As I said, I should have said it with emphasis, COVID really slowed us down.
Right.
And so we're, I go for at least 6 weeks out of the year. I'm going to split it up more and take shorter trips more often so that I can get things done, because things work differently there. What might take us 3 days could take them 3 months. And it's like pulling teeth, but that's just the way it is. But again, I want to be in a place where I feel peace. And that, if you look at what the wealthy are doing, all of them have multiple homes in different places. I can name them, but all you have to do is look at where people have their domicile. And a lot of times their main home isn't even in the United States. So
Right.
talking about expatriating, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, well, that was an argument that I had with some people. It's like I really wanted to find out if some of these expats had researched any of the legal fiction stuff and found it to be invalid, and that's why they did it, because some people just really despised the American government and just wanted to get off the soil, period. It didn't matter if they could find a proper way out or not. It was just like, nope, I just want off the ship. Get me off the ship.
Right. And a lot of it, the ones that I've talked to from all over the world, is because of the taxation, not just here in the United States, but in other countries. They're taxing the people to death. And when you get older and you're on a fixed income, that's when it really gets bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when you said Costa Rica, I know there's the same thing with Costa Rica and Belize. There's a lot of people doing something similar. So be cool to see some synergy between all those different ideas kind of working together in parallel. Before we wrap up this part and move on to something that's too hot for YouTube, do you have any final thoughts for what we've been talking about on this part of the interview, Miss Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson? I want to say I'm sorry, Miss Jackson.
I know people do that all the time.
I am for real though.
Yeah, I'm used to that. Even though the song is old, people still do that. No,
I
I
know,
know
I know.
your listeners probably are already out of the box, but I'm
Most,
asking
yeah.
them to ditch the box and come up with some solutions, because my intel tells me we don't have much longer. 2023 is going to be interesting, but 2024, from what I hear, yeah. So get your plan together, make it no longer than a year, and start implementing as much of it as possible as soon as possible.
2024. All right. So we're going to do a second part. It's not going to be on YouTube. I'll put links down below so you guys can check that out. Just bear with me 1 second. I want to wrap up this part. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't smashed that like button, be sure to do so. Make sure you subscribe at both of my YouTube channels, Rice TVX and Rice Against the Grain. And I will leave you with this. I encourage you, as always, to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch you want to see in the matrix, and be the change that you want to see in the world. And until next time, practice change.